Maya, the answer you wrote is incredible. In the corridors of the university, where intellect was measured by grades and degrees, a young black woman named Maya struggled to find her way in a world that was never meant for her. At 22, she worked quietly as a cleaner in the hushed corners of the campus, her brilliance standing in stark contrast to the work she did. One night, during her shift, she caught sight of a single complex mathematical problem on the board through a slightly open door to a lecture hall. When the professors left, she slipped inside and solved it. From the moment they discovered Maya, nothing would ever be the same again. If you liked the video and have subscribed to my channel, let's move on to our story. Enjoy watching. The shriek of her alarm clock at 3:45 a.m. was not a signal to start the day, but a harsh reminder that her day had barely ended. For Maya, it was less a wake-up call and more the final, jarring chord in a symphony of exhaustion. Her small one-room apartment was as Spartan as a monk's cell, the walls painted a faded beige that did little to brighten the oppressive gloom. The only splashes of color were the dog-eared spines of old calculus, linear algebra, and topology textbooks stacked on a small nightstand, a testament to a life she yearned for but could not afford. She swung her feet off the flimsy mattress, the cold linoleum floor shocking her soles. A quick glance at her phone confirmed what she already knew: 2 new emails from her landlord about late rent and a text message from her younger brother, Malik, asking if she could spare a few dollars for a school trip. The weight of these responsibilities was a physical ache in her chest, heavier than the tote bag filled with cleaning supplies she'd carry later that morning. After a rushed shower, she dressed in her worn black uniform, sturdy trousers and a simple, nondescript polo shirt. She tied her hair back in a tight bun, her reflection in the chipped mirror showing a young woman whose 22 years of life had etched a world of weariness in her eyes. The fire was there, a deep, intelligent spark, but it was currently banked, waiting for a breeze it wasn't sure would ever come. The pre-dawn streets of the city were quiet and cold, the only movement the slow, rhythmic sweep of streetlights. Maya walked with her head down, lost in a world of her own creation. Her mind, a constant whir of calculations, found comfort in the predictable chaos of the urban landscape. She mentally calculated the angle of the sun's future rise, the exact square footage of the sidewalk tiles, the probability of a bus arriving on time. In a world where she felt utterly powerless, these numbers gave her a sense of control. They were a refuge from the unpredictable reality of her life. She arrived at the gates of Northwood University just as a faint wash of purple began to lighten the horizon. The campus was a stunning tableau of Gothic architecture and sprawling green lawns, a silent, sleeping giant of academia. Students were just starting to stir in their dorms, their worlds a universe away from her own. Maya's job was to erase the residue of their intellectual pursuits before they woke up, to clean their mess, literally and figuratively. She was a ghost, a phantom who moved through the hallowed halls of learning, unseen and unacknowledged. Her shift began in the Department of Mathematics. As she unlocked the door to the long fluorescent-lit hallway, the scent of old paper, dry erase markers and stale coffee enveloped her. It was a familiar smell, a cocktail of intellectual pursuit and exhaustion that she knew intimately, but from the outside looking in. Her job was methodical and mind-numbingly simple. She pushed the heavy cleaning cart, its wheels groaning under the weight, from office to office. She emptied trash cans overflowing with scratched paper covered in complex equations, wiped down desks where coffee mug rings stained polished wood, and restocked paper in the printers. One of the offices belonged to Dr. Alastair Finch, a renowned number theorist. Maya knew his name because she'd read his work online, downloading pirated academic papers late at night when the Wi-Fi in her apartment was free. As she wiped down his blackboard, a pristine slate where a theorem from earlier that day was still faintly visible, she felt a pang of sorrow. The proof, an elegant sequence of logic and intuition, was one she had been working on in her spare time. She'd found a quicker way to arrive at the conclusion, a more direct route than the one Dr. Finch had taken. She traced her finger over the faint chalk lines, her mind already racing ahead, solving the problem in a way that would have made her a prodigy, not a cleaner. She moved from office to office, her body on autopilot while her mind wandered freely. She imagined herself walking to class, a worn leather backpack slung over her shoulder. She envisioned herself sitting in a lecture hall, not at the back of the room wiping down chairs, but at the front, her hand raised, ready to pose a thoughtful, nuanced question. She pictured the professors not as people she served from a distance, but as mentors, collaborators, and colleagues. It was a fantasy she indulged in often, a necessary escape from the grinding reality of her life. Maya's passion for mathematics had taken root in her childhood, nurtured by a single gifted high school teacher who saw in her a raw, unbridled talent. He had helped her apply to colleges, filling out scholarship applications and writing impassioned letters of recommendation. She had been accepted into a handful of top schools, but the scholarships weren't enough. There were still tuition fees, housing costs, and the need to support her family, especially after her mother fell ill. The numbers just didn't add up. So, instead of pursuing her academic dreams, she chose the path that offered a steady paycheck, no matter how small. By the time her shift ended, the campus was buzzing with life. Students, their faces lit up by the morning sun, hurried to class with backpacks and notebooks. They chatted animatedly, their conversations a jumble of abstract concepts and future plans. Maya watched them from a distance, a silent observer in a world she was not a part of. She walked back through the gates, the world of Northwood University shrinking behind her, its beauty a painful reminder of her own unfulfilled potential. Back in her apartment, the air was still and heavy with the smell of old books and cleaning supplies. She peeled off her uniform, her muscles screaming in protest. She made a simple meal of instant noodles and then, unable to resist, she reached for the stack of textbooks. She pulled out her favorite, a well-worn copy of Spivak's Calculus, its pages filled with her own meticulous notes and scribbles in the margins. As she lost herself in the elegant world of proofs and theorems, the exhaustion faded. The numbers filled her mind, chasing away the worries about rent and bills. In this world, she wasn't a cleaner, an employee, or a provider. She was simply Maya, a mathematician. And for a few hours that was enough. She was not a cleaner, she was a brilliant mind trapped in an unyielding cycle of work. And tomorrow she would do it all over again. Her story was not one of despair, but one of patient, quiet endurance. The fire in her eyes was not gone, it was simply biding its time, waiting for the right moment to ignite. The second day arrived much like the first, a seamless extension of the previous one. Maya awoke to the same oppressive silence, broken only by the low hum of the refrigerator. The 2 emails from her landlord were now joined by a third, the tone slightly more insistent. It felt like the walls of her small apartment were closing in on her, each unpaid bill a brick in a tomb of her own making. The fantasy of the previous night, the abstract world of numbers where her mind was free, had dissipated with the rising sun, replaced by the hard, unforgiving reality of her financial situation. After her usual quick meal of whatever she had in the pantry, she pulled out a worn notebook from beneath her bed. It was her sanctuary, a repository of her mathematical thoughts, filled with equations and theorems she had worked on in her spare time. She flipped to a recent page, a problem involving non-Euclidean geometry that had been nagging at her. The solution had been eluding her for weeks, a stubborn variable in an equation she couldn't solve. Her pencil flew across the page, a blur of motion as she tried a new approach, a different perspective. But her focus was fractured. Every few minutes, her mind would wander to the bills, the rent, the text from Malik, the weight of her responsibilities pulling her away from the elegant, logical world she loved. No, that's wrong, she muttered, erasing a line of calculation with a sigh. The numbers, usually her friends, felt like they were mocking her today. They were so pure and perfect, so unlike the messy, imperfect world she lived in. It was a sharp, painful contrast. Her phone buzzed. It was Malik. "Hey, what's up?" she answered, her voice softening. "Just wanted to see if you were able to send that money for my trip?" he asked, his voice hopeful. Maya's heart sank. "I'm so sorry, Malik. Not yet. I had some unexpected things come up with rent." "Oh, okay," he said, the disappointment evident. "No problem. Just thought I'd ask. Thanks anyway, Maya." "Malik, I promise I'll get it for you as soon as I can. Don't worry about it. Just focus on your school." "I will. Bye, Maya." The call ended, but the guilt lingered, a bitter taste on her tongue. It was a recurring cycle. The need to provide, the inability to do so, the gnawing feeling of letting her family down. She closed her notebook, the unsolved problem a metaphor for her life. Some things, it seemed, just couldn't be fixed. The numbers didn't lie. By the time she arrived at Northwood, the campus was already bustling with activity. It was a different kind of day, filled with the energy of students returning from a long weekend. Laughter echoed across the lawns, and groups of young people sat on benches, heads bent over textbooks, laptops open. Maya watched them, a silent observer in a world she was not a part of. She noticed a group of students huddled around a whiteboard near the mathematics building, their faces a mixture of frustration and intense concentration as they scribbled out complex formulas. A professor stood nearby, his arms crossed, a patient smile on his face. Maya felt a pull, a magnetic attraction to the scene. Her mind, despite her best efforts, began to work through the problem on the board, finding a path to the solution almost instinctively. She saw their errors, the small, almost imperceptible missteps in their reasoning that had led them down a convoluted path. She longed to step forward, to correct their mistakes, to offer a different perspective. But she didn't. She was invisible here. A cleaner. Not a student. Not a mathematician. She pushed her cart into the Department of Applied Mathematics, the squeak of the wheels a familiar, comforting sound. Her tasks were the same. Empty the waste baskets, wipe down the desks, sweep and mop the floors. The routine was a form of meditation, a way to quiet her mind and focus on the present. But her brain, a restless machine, refused to be silenced. As she wiped the desk clean, she mentally conjugated verbs in a foreign language. While she swept the hallway, she solved a quadratic equation she'd been thinking about earlier. The mundanity of her work was a stark contrast to the complexity of her thoughts. She passed Dr. Evelyn Reed's office, a formidable woman known for her work in cryptography. The door was ajar, and Maya caught a glimpse of a wall covered in white boards, each one filled with a dense, intricate web of symbols and numbers. It was a beautiful, terrifying sight, a visual representation of a mind at the peak of its powers. Maya paused just for a moment to admire the work. Dr. Reed was a legend, a woman who had broken down barriers and shattered glass ceilings. She was everything Maya wanted to be. But the door, a physical and metaphorical barrier, was all that stood between them. She knew that even if Dr. Reed were to see her, she would see only a cleaner, not a peer. The rest of the day passed in a blur of motion and thought. The hours slipped away as she moved through the vast, sprawling building, her mind lost in its own world of numbers. Her final task was to clean the main lecture hall, a massive auditorium with rows of worn wooden seats and a cavernous ceiling. It was the room where the most important lectures were held, the place where the best and brightest minds of Northwood came to learn. As she pushed her cart toward the room, her hand brushing against the cool metal of the door handle, she felt a jolt of nervous energy. This room was a place of reverence for her, the sanctum of the mathematics department. The door was unlocked, a detail that was unusual for a classroom after hours. A faint sliver of light, a gentle yellow glow, seeped out from the crack beneath the door. It wasn't the harsh fluorescent light she was used to, but something warmer, more inviting. She paused, her hand hovering over the doorknob. The university was supposed to be empty by now, save for a few straggling students. But the light suggested otherwise. Curiosity, a quiet but persistent fire in her heart, outweighed her exhaustion. She felt an invisible force pulling her toward the room, an unshakable sense of anticipation. She took a deep breath, her mind racing with possibilities. Maybe it was a professor working late, or perhaps a group of students studying for a difficult exam. Whatever it was, the light was a beacon, a signal that something was happening inside, something that felt important. Something that felt like it was waiting for her. With a slow, deliberate movement, she pushed the door open, her heart pounding a steady rhythm in her chest. The sight that greeted her, however, was not what she expected. The gentle push of the heavy lecture hall door revealed not an empty room, but a tableau of intellectual intensity. The air inside was warm, thick with the scent of dry erase markers and strong coffee. The light wasn't a solitary bulb but a soft, focused glow from a series of high-powered spotlights trained on the massive green chalkboard at the front of the room. It was an enormous canvas, spanning the entire width of the stage, and it was covered, from edge to edge, in a dense, intricate forest of symbols, equations, and diagrams. Maya's eyes immediately found the source of the commotion. 3 figures stood at the board, all with their backs to her, deep in what appeared to be a heated yet collaborative discussion. One of them was Dr. Alistair Finch, the renowned number theorist whose office Maya cleaned daily. His voice was a low rumble as he gestured emphatically at a section of the board. Beside him was Dr. Evelyn Reed, the formidable cryptographer, her brow furrowed in concentration as she meticulously erased and rewrote a complex matrix. The third figure, a younger man with wild, unkempt hair, was Dr. Julian Chin, a rising star in the field of quantum mathematics. Maya stood frozen in the doorway, her cleaning cart a silent sentinel behind her. She felt like an intruder, a phantom who had stumbled into a sacred rite. The conversation flowed between them in a language that, to an outsider, would have sounded like utter gibberish, but to Maya, it was as clear as the morning news. They were debating a problem of immense complexity, a new conjecture related to the Riemann hypothesis, one of the most famous unsolved problems in mathematics. The challenge was to find a more elegant and comprehensive proof for a specific subproblem that had remained stubbornly unresolved for decades. The problem was a monstrous beast, its body a labyrinth of nested functions and its head a series of paradoxes that seemed to defy all known logic. Maya's mind, a constant, restless engine, immediately began to work. She took in the entire scope of the problem in a single, comprehensive glance, absorbing the layers of complexity, the logic they had already exhausted, and the fundamental flaw in their current approach. She saw the root of their problem, a flawed assumption at the beginning of their proof. They were trying to solve the problem within a framework that was inherently too restrictive, like trying to prove a sphere is round using only the tools of a two-dimensional plane. A different axiom, a new way of looking at the initial conditions was needed. The solution she saw was not to force the problem to fit into their existing model, but to expand the model itself. She stood there for what felt like an eternity, her heart pounding in her chest, a potent mix of awe and intellectual hunger. The sheer elegance of the problem was a siren's call, and her brain was already racing ahead, sketching out the new framework, the logical steps, and the final, beautiful conclusion. She saw it all laid out in her mind, a clear and undeniable path from the first line to the last. Suddenly, Dr. Finch clapped his hands together with a sigh of frustration. "This is getting us nowhere. My brain is fried. I can't even see the board anymore. Let's take a 10-minute break. I need some caffeine." Dr. Reed and Dr. Chin nodded in tired agreement. Dr. Reed's voice, though weary, still held a hint of her characteristic rigor. "I agree. We're going in circles. A fresh perspective is what we need. Let's reconvene in a few." As they gathered their papers and shuffled out of the room, their backs still turned to the doorway, Maya instinctively pressed herself against the wall, her body coiled in an effort to be as small and invisible as possible. The heavy door swung shut behind them with a quiet thud, leaving Maya alone in the silent, humming space. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the spotlights, and the massive chalkboard was a silent, beckoning challenge. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Every ounce of her being screamed at her to leave, to get back to her job, to not risk being discovered. But the problem, an unfinished symphony, was too much to resist. The flaw in their logic was so obvious to her, the solution so clear. It was a tangible thing, a puzzle with a missing piece that only she could see. Without a moment's hesitation, she pushed her cleaning cart to the side of the door, out of sight. Her footsteps were quiet on the hardwood floor as she approached the board. The chalk tray held an array of tools, a mix of old-fashioned white chalk, colored pieces for diagrams, and a handful of dry erase markers. She picked up a fresh piece of white chalk, its powdery texture cool against her fingertips. She didn't start at the beginning of their work, erasing it to start fresh. Instead, she found the point of their flawed assumption, a small, elegant line of reasoning that, to her, represented the genesis of their entire problem. With a decisive stroke, she drew a single, clean line through it. Then, standing before the vast green canvas, she began to write. Her movements were not hesitant or exploratory. They were fluid, confident, and precise, a dance of logic and intuition. The chalk scraped against the board with a soft, rhythmic sound, each mark a new sentence in the proof she was constructing. She was not just solving the problem, she was rewriting the narrative of their entire approach. She moved from one end of the board to the other, her body swaying slightly as she wrote, her mind completely and utterly consumed. All worries about rent, about Malik, about her invisibility, they all vanished. In this moment she wasn't a cleaner. She was a mathematician, and the chalkboard was her world. 15 minutes later, she was so deeply engrossed that she didn't hear the lecture hall door swing open again. Alastair Finch, Evelyn Reed, and Julian Chin stood in the doorway, their coffee cups in hand. They had returned early, their brains refreshed but still humming with the unresolved problem. They were in the middle of a joke when they saw her, a solitary figure at the front of the room, her back to them. The sight was so unexpected, so jarring, that they all fell silent, their eyes wide with confusion. The initial shock was that a cleaner was at the front of the room. The second, more profound shock, was that she was writing on the chalkboard. But the third, a gut punch of disbelief, was that she was not just writing, but extending their problem with an entirely new line of reasoning. They stayed in the doorway unnoticed. They watched as she filled a blank section of the board, her chalk marks flowing with a grace and confidence that seemed impossible. They watched as she moved with a purpose they had themselves lost, her hand flying across the green canvas with a speed that spoke of a mind that had already solved the problem 1,000 times over. They watched her make her final mark, a decisive, triumphant line that completed the proof, before she took a step back, the chalk dust smudged on her uniform. The silence in the room was electric. The three professors stared at the board, then at the young woman, and then back at the board. The proof, the one they had been struggling with for weeks, was solved. But not only that, it was solved in a way they hadn't even considered, a stunningly elegant and direct route that made their own attempts seem clumsy and convoluted. They had been trying to bash a square peg into a round hole, and this young woman had simply redesigned the hole. Maya, finally stepping back to admire her work, let out a slow, satisfied breath. The mental exertion was immense, but the feeling of completion was a drug. She turned to get her cart, her mind already moving on to the next problem when she saw them. 3 pairs of eyes, a mix of astonishment and something she couldn't yet comprehend, were fixed on her. The coffee cups in their hands were forgotten. Her body instantly coiled with embarrassment. A deep, mortifying blush crept up her neck and cheeks. The academic language that had been so clear just moments ago now felt like a foreign tongue. The confidence she had felt at the chalkboard evaporated, replaced by a searing shame. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, her voice barely a tremor in the quiet room. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I should have asked. I was just... She trailed off, unable to find the words. She felt the weight of her uniform, the dirt on her shoes, the distance between their worlds. She had intruded, crossed a line she was never meant to cross. The silence stretched between them, an uncomfortable chasm of judgment. She braced herself for the inevitable reprimand. She had overstepped her bounds and now she would pay the price. The silence in the lecture hall was a living thing, thick with a mix of awe and disbelief. Maya stood frozen, her mind a frantic jumble of apologies. She watched the 3 professors, her own humiliation mirroring the shock in their faces. But the expected anger never came. Instead, the expression on Dr. Finch's face, a man whose lectures she had surreptitiously watched online, shifted from surprise to something resembling a child's wonder. Dr. Reed's normally stern demeanor softened, her eyes fixed not on Maya, but on the new solution written on the chalkboard. Dr. Chin, the youngest and most expressive of the group, simply shook his head, a slow, disbelieving smile spreading across his lips. Finally, Dr. Finch broke the silence, his voice a low, reverent murmur. That's it, he said, not to Maya but to the board. He walked slowly toward the chalkboard, his steps quiet and deliberate, as if approaching a holy relic. He stopped just a few feet from the proof, his hand hovering over the chalk marks. The initial assumption. You saw it. He looked back at Maya, his gaze piercing. We've been at this for months. We were trying to force a result, to make it fit our preconceived notions. We never thought to reframe the problem from a new axiom. It's beautiful. Dr. Reed joined him, her gaze just as intense. It's not just a solution, Alistair. It's a new perspective. A different way of seeing the entire field. She turned to Maya, her eyes finally meeting the young woman's. Who are you? She asked, her voice hushed with respect. And how did you do this? Maya felt her composure fraying. The shame she had felt moments ago was replaced by a disorienting mix of confusion and a nervous thrill. I'm a cleaner, ma'am, she stammered, the words feeling pitiful and small in the vast room. I work on the night shift. I saw the problem and I couldn't help myself. I'm so sorry. No, don't apologize, Dr. Chin said, stepping forward. He gestured to the board. This isn't an apology. This is a discovery. But you didn't answer the question. How did you know to do that? Where did you learn to think that way? Their questions were not an inquisition, but a genuine, burning curiosity. Emboldened by their tone, Maya took a shaky breath. I've been studying on my own for years. I didn't get to go to university. The scholarships weren't enough to cover everything and I had to work. But I've been following your work. Dr. Finch, I've read all your papers on number theory. Dr. Reed, your work on public key cryptography is brilliant. It helped me understand so much about prime factorization. And Dr. Chin, your lectures on quantum physics are some of the most elegant I've ever seen. I've just been teaching myself. The three professors exchanged a look. It was a look of profound, mutual understanding. They were no longer seeing a cleaner, they were seeing a mind of unparalleled genius, a mind that had been toiling in obscurity, a mind that belonged here, among them. Dr. Finch was the first to speak again, his voice now firm and decisive. "This is unacceptable," he said, his eyes blazing with a new purpose. "A mind like yours, it can't be wasted. It must be nurtured. Dr. Reed, Dr. Chin, we have to get her into this university. It's our moral and academic duty." Dr. Reed nodded without a second's hesitation. "We'll call the dean. We'll show her this proof." She took out her phone, her fingers already flying. "It's late, but she needs to see this now. This is a matter of institutional pride. A talent like this, discovered on our own campus, cannot be ignored." "I'll handle the scholarship committee," Dr. Chin added, his voice buzzing with excitement. "I know some benefactors who would be thrilled to fund something like this. We'll make sure she has enough for everything: tuition, housing, a stipend for her family. Every penny she needs to live and study here without having to work. She will not clean another floor for the rest of her life." Maya, listening to this whirlwind of plans, felt as though she were in a dream. Wait, please," she said, her voice trembling. I don't understand. What are you saying? I don't have the academic record. I'm not a student." Dr. Finch stepped toward her, a hand on her shoulder. "Maya," he said, his voice gentle. "You are more of a student than most of the people who walk through these doors. Your academic record is on that board." He gestured to the proof. "That proof is better than any graduate thesis I've ever read. We will handle the rest. Don't you worry about a thing." Over the next few days, Maya's life became a strange, surreal dance between her old world and a new one that was trying to be born. She continued her cleaning shifts, but now her work felt different. The halls of Northwood were no longer a world apart. They were her future home. She would get text messages from Dr. Finch during her lunch break. "We met with the dean. She's interested but skeptical. We're fighting for you." An email from Dr. Reed would pop up on her phone. Attached is the admissions packet. "Fill out the paperwork, but don't worry about the transcripts. We have a plan for that." The professors, meanwhile, were a force of nature. They descended on the dean of admissions, Dr. Eleanor Vance, like a determined storm. Dr. Vance, a woman of strict rules and protocols, listened with a polite but unimpressed expression as they laid out their case. "So, let me get this straight," Dr. Vance said, her glasses perched on her nose. "You want me to admit a cleaner who has no formal academic record to our graduate mathematics program on a full ride?" "Not just a cleaner, Eleanor," Dr. Finch said, his voice rising with passion. "An intellect. A genius. You can see the proof yourself." He gestured to the laminated photograph of the chalkboard. "She solved a problem that has eluded us for months. She saw a solution we couldn't." "A solved problem is not a transcript, Alistair," Dr. Vance countered, her tone cool and collected. "This is a prestigious university. We have a process. We have standards." Dr. Reed leaned forward, her hands flat on the dean's desk. "And this is a new standard, Eleanor. A new process. What is our mission? To find and nurture the best minds. And we have found one. She is a diamond in the rough, and we would be fools to ignore her simply because her life circumstances have been difficult." Dr. Chen pulled out his laptop, a series of emails and documents already pulled up. "I've already spoken with 3 separate benefactors. They are willing to set up a private endowment for her, so the cost to the university will be minimal. They are just as excited about this as we are." The meeting became a heated 2-hour debate. Dr. Vance was a formidable opponent, citing university regulations, precedent, and the potential for a public relations nightmare if things went wrong. But the professors were relentless. They argued with a passion that came not just from their academic rigor but from a deep, personal conviction. They believed in Maya, and they were willing to put their own reputations on the line to prove it. Finally, Dr. Vance sighed, taking off her glasses and rubbing the bridge of her nose. "All right," she said, her voice tired but resigned. "This is completely unprecedented. But I will make an exception. We'll admit her as a special case, a provisional student. The scholarship will be granted, and the financial aid from your benefactors will be approved. But if she doesn't perform, if she falls behind, there will be no second chances." The three professors' faces broke into triumphant smiles. It was a victory, a monumental breakthrough. They had done it. They had moved mountains for a young woman they had just met, all because they had seen the fire of genius in her eyes. The next day Maya's phone rang. It was Dr. Finch. "Hello, Maya," he said, his voice bright with a joy she had never heard from him before. "I have good news. Better than good news. You're in. On a full scholarship. We've arranged for a stipend to cover your living expenses and support your family. You start next semester. Congratulations." Maya's world, which had been so small and suffocating, suddenly expanded. The silence of her apartment, the weight of her responsibilities, the ache in her chest, it all evaporated, replaced by a feeling of pure, unadulterated hope. A new chapter of her life had just begun. The transition from night shift cleaner to graduate student was not the smooth, cinematic montage Maya had imagined. The full scholarship and generous stipend had lifted an unimaginable weight from her shoulders, allowing her to pay off her debts and even send a substantial amount to Malik. The relief was intoxicating, a sweet balm on years of financial stress. But the emotional and social hurdles that followed were as complex and daunting as any mathematical problem she had ever encountered. She was no longer wearing her blue uniform. The university's benefactors, through Dr. Chin, had provided her with a stipend for academic necessities, which included a laptop and a small budget for new clothes. The first time she walked into a department store, she felt a profound sense of dislocation. She was used to functional, durable clothes for work, not the fashionable, comfortable apparel she was now supposed to wear. She chose simple, classic pieces that wouldn't draw attention to her, an attempt to blend into the sea of privileged students who seemed to wear their confidence as a second skin. The first day of classes was a crucible of nervous energy. The campus, once a place she moved through in the silent shadows of night, was now a vibrant, humming ecosystem. She carried a backpack full of brand new textbooks, their weight a tangible reminder of her new reality. Her first class was a graduate seminar on algebraic topology, taught by a visiting professor from MIT, a brilliant but notoriously intimidating academic named Dr. Eleanor Vance. Yes, the same dean who had reluctantly approved her entry. The irony was not lost on Maya. She entered the classroom, a small, intimate space with a large conference table at its center. The other students were already there, all of them looking impossibly young and self-assured. Their conversations swirled around her in a low, intellectual hum, a language she understood but wasn't fluent in. They spoke of summer research projects, of conferences in Zurich, of internships at tech companies Maya had only read about. She took a seat at the far end of the table, feeling a familiar sense of invisibility, a ghost in her own new life. Dr. Vance arrived moments later, her demeanor as precise and sharp as the lines of her black suit. She introduced the class and then, to Maya's quiet horror, went around the table, asking each student to introduce themselves and their academic background. Maya's turn felt like an eternity away. When it came, she mumbled her name and explained that she was a special admission student with a background in self-study. A few curious glances were thrown her way, but the topic quickly moved on, leaving her with the distinct feeling that she had been categorized, filed away as an anomaly, an asterisk next to the word student. The lecture began, a dense exploration of homology and cohomology. The concepts were not new to Maya. She had devoured textbooks on the subject in the quiet hours of her night shifts. But the language, the specific academic jargon and the subtle, unspoken assumptions, was alien. The other students nodded along knowingly, their hands flying to take notes. Maya felt a frustrating disconnect between the knowledge in her brain and the words coming out of the professor's mouth. It was as if she knew the destination but couldn't understand the map they were all following. A moment of pure, unadulterated imposter syndrome washed over her. She knew the material, but did she belong here? Had the professors made a mistake? Was she a fraud, a temporary anomaly that would soon be discovered and expelled? She looked down at her hands, the nails still showing faint traces of cleaning fluid despite her diligent scrubbing. The old reality clung to her, a phantom limb she couldn't quite shake. Suddenly Dr. Vance paused her lecture. "All right, a quick thought experiment," she said, her eyes scanning the room. She wrote a complex problem on a small whiteboard, a question about a particular kind of manifold. The room went silent. Students chewed on their pencils, their brows furrowed in concentration. Maya's brain, a tireless machine, immediately began to work. She saw the question not just as a topological problem, but as a structural one, a problem of symmetry and abstraction that transcended the specific formulas. She saw a different way, a more direct route to the answer. She saw the solution, but she didn't raise her hand. She was too afraid of being wrong, of being exposed. Dr. Vance looked directly at her. "Maya," she said, her voice holding an unexpected note of challenge. "You look like you have an idea. What are your thoughts?" All eyes were on her. The silence was deafening. She swallowed hard, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. I think the flaw is in the assumption of its triviality, ma'am," she began, her voice shaky at first. "If you consider the symmetry of the fundamental group, the problem resolves itself into a different kind of classification. You can't just apply the standard theorem. You have to create a new category for it." She looked at the board and began to write, her hand moving with a fluid confidence that she didn't feel. She sketched out a diagram showing the flawed assumption and the new path to the solution. The other students at the table stared at the work, then at her, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning recognition. Dr. Vance simply watched, a small, almost imperceptible smile forming at the corner of her lips. When Maya was finished, the room remained quiet for a few beats. Then Dr. Vance clapped her hands together, a sharp, decisive sound. "Precisely," she said. "The rest of you take note. That is not just an answer. That is a way of thinking that is essential to this field. The ability to see beyond the standard framework. Thank you, Maya." The students looked at Maya with new eyes, no longer seeing an anomaly but a prodigy. The moment of triumph was fleeting, however. In the following weeks, Maya excelled academically, but socially she remained a satellite. She would overhear students discussing weekend getaways or lamenting their parents' choice of car. These were small things, but they created an enormous divide. She didn't have these shared experiences, this social shorthand. She spent most of her time alone, eating her lunch in the library, a quiet refuge where the only conversations were the silent dialogues of books and the humming of the air conditioning. It was here that she found her true solace. The library, with its endless rows of books, was a boundless repository of knowledge, a physical manifestation of everything she had yearned for. She would spend hours buried in the stacks, finding new authors, new theorems, new problems to solve. The work was hard, but it was a familiar kind of hard, a struggle she understood. A few weeks into the semester, she was walking back to her small student apartment when she saw Dr. Finch, Dr. Reed, and Dr. Chen sitting together at a cafe laughing. They saw her and waved her over. "Maya, come join us," Dr. Finch said, patting the seat next to him. She sat down awkwardly, but their warmth was disarming. "How are you adjusting?" Dr. Reed asked gently. "We haven't seen you much. We know this can be a difficult transition." "It's good," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The work is hard, but it's what I love. I feel a bit like an outsider. Like I don't really belong here." Dr. Finch sighed, leaning forward. "Maya, I want to tell you a story. When I came to this country, I was the first person in my family to ever go to university. I spoke with a thick accent and I had a different way of thinking. My colleagues, they laughed at my ideas, they called my work too abstract. I felt like a fraud for years. I thought they would all find me out. But the truth is, the best minds in any field are the ones who don't fit in. It's the outsiders, the ones who see the world differently, who make the real breakthroughs." Dr. Chen nodded. "He's right. Every one of us has a story like that. We all have our own forms of imposter syndrome. But what we saw you do in that lecture hall, that wasn't a fluke. That was your truth. And you have every right to be here. We fought for you, Maya, because we knew what we saw. You are not a temporary student. You are a permanent force." Their words were a balm to her soul, a much-needed dose of validation. They weren't just her professors. They were her first true allies in this new world. They didn't see the cleaner she used to be, they saw the mathematician she had always been. She went back to her room that night with a new sense of purpose. Her first major problem set, a monstrously difficult assignment from Dr. Chin, lay on her desk. The problems were not just about finding answers. They were about a deeper understanding, about the elegant communication of ideas. She picked up a pencil, her mind already buzzing with possibilities. The feeling of being an outsider hadn't completely vanished, but it no longer felt like a death sentence. It felt like a badge of honor. She was an outsider with a different perspective, and in the world of mathematics, that was the most valuable thing of all. The night passed in a blur of equations, her work now her sanctuary, her purpose, and her home. She was no longer just solving problems, she was building a future. Months had passed since Maya's first day as a student at Northwood University. The cold of winter had given way to the gentle warmth of spring, and with it, Maya's life had settled into a new, comfortable rhythm. The initial awkwardness of her transition had softened. She was no longer a ghost in the halls but a presence, a quiet but respected mind. Her grades were flawless, a perfect record of her relentless self-study and an intellect that far outpaced her peers. Her relationship with Dr. Finch, Dr. Reed, and Dr. Chen had evolved into a profound mentorship. They no longer simply taught her. They challenged her, presenting her with new conjectures, pushing her to think beyond the known boundaries of mathematics. She had found a small circle of friends, a group of graduate students who had been initially skeptical but had come to respect her genius. They were not from the same privileged backgrounds as some of the undergraduates, but they shared a common passion for problem solving. Over late-night study sessions fueled by black coffee and stale bagels, they discovered that Maya's mind was not only brilliant but also profoundly humble. She was a natural teacher, able to distill the most complex theories into their purest, most beautiful form. She was still reserved but no longer shy. Her confidence was no longer fragile. It was an undeniable reality, built on the solid foundation of hard-won knowledge. One afternoon, in the middle of a discussion with Dr. Finch in his office, he slid a pamphlet across his desk. It was for the Northwood Mathematics Invitational, a prestigious in-house competition held every spring. The winner would be the sole candidate to represent the university at the prestigious Intercollegiate Mathematics Olympiad. It was a fiercely competitive event, not just about solving problems, but about doing so under immense pressure, in front of a live audience of professors and students. "It's a proving ground, Maya," Dr. Finch said, his eyes twinkling. "A chance to show them what you can do. Not just the faculty but the other students. You have to enter." Maya's first instinct was to say no. The thought of a public competition, of being the center of attention, made her stomach clench. "Dr. Finch, I don't think so. I'm not good with public speaking. And besides, I'm just happy to be here." Dr. Finch leaned forward, his voice serious. "Maya, this isn't about public speaking. This is about showing the world what happens when a mind like yours is given a chance. It's about more than just you. It's about every young person who has a dream but not the means. It's a statement. And besides," he added with a wry smile, "you are our best shot. You are by far the strongest candidate we have." His words, a mix of mentorship and gentle persuasion, resonated with her. She thought about Malik, about her family, about the countless hours she had spent in the quiet library, teaching herself. This wasn't just a competition. It was a way to honor that past, to prove that her struggle had been worth it. She filled out the application that night. The next few weeks were a blur of intense preparation. Dr. Finch, Dr. Reed, and Dr. Chen took on the role of her personal coaches. They would meet her after their classes, pushing her with increasingly difficult problems, simulating the pressure of the competition, and teaching her not just how to solve but how to think on her feet. Dr. Reed presented her with cryptography problems, complex and layered, that forced her to think about logic and abstraction in a new way. Dr. Chin gave her problems in quantum mechanics that required her to find new frameworks and solutions from first principles. Dr. Finch, her original mentor, worked with her on the elegant and precise communication of her proofs. He taught her how to present her work not as a simple solution, but as a compelling, beautiful narrative. Maya's mind absorbed it all, a sponge soaking up every bit of knowledge. She found a new kind of confidence, not just in her ability to solve problems, but in her ability to articulate her thought process, to make her genius visible. The day of the competition arrived with a burst of late spring sunshine. The event was held in the university's main auditorium, a grand, intimidating space with a large stage and tiered seating. The room was packed with students and faculty. The air was electric with anticipation and a palpable sense of intellectual rivalry. Maya saw her professors in the front row, their faces a mix of anxiety and quiet support. She saw her friends in the seats behind them, their smiles a silent promise of encouragement. She was the sole candidate from the mathematics department, competing against graduate students from physics, computer science, and engineering. It felt like the weight of an entire department was on her shoulders. The competition had 2 rounds. The first was a preliminary round, a series of timed written problems. Maya's hand flew across the paper, her mind clear and focused. The problems were challenging, but she approached them with a quiet confidence that came from months of preparation. She finished in half the allotted time, her proofs clean, elegant, and flawless. The judges, a panel of senior professors from various departments, tabulated the scores. The first round results were announced. Maya was the only person to score a perfect 100. The final round was a public challenge. The auditorium lights dimmed, and a single spotlight came on, illuminating a large whiteboard on the stage. A moderator, a distinguished professor from the physics department, stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have our final competitor. The sole perfect scorer from the preliminary round, Miss Maya Jones. Congratulations." A polite round of applause rippled through the audience. Maya walked onto the stage, her mind a blank slate, her senses hyper-focused on the task ahead. The moderator announced the final problem. It was a monstrously difficult problem from the field of topological data analysis, a field so new that many in the room were not even familiar with its fundamentals. The problem was a puzzle wrapped in a riddle, asking her to prove a new conjecture about the persistence of homology groups in a particular kind of data set. It was designed to be almost impossible to solve in the 30 minutes she had. Maya walked up to the board, a single marker in her hand. She stood there for a full minute, her eyes closed, her mind working furiously. She could feel the collective gaze of the audience, the silent expectations of her professors, the skepticism of her competitors. But all of it faded. The outside world melted away, replaced by the beautiful, silent architecture of the problem. She saw not the intimidating jargon but the underlying structure. She saw the problem not as a topological puzzle, but as a geometric one that could be solved with a series of simple, elegant transformations. Her hand began to move. She didn't write a single line of equations. Instead, she drew a diagram, a series of shapes and arrows, a visual proof that explained the problem with stunning clarity. She then began to write the equations, her proof a clean, logical narrative that built upon the diagram, each line a new sentence in a compelling argument. She moved with a silent, graceful power, her hand flying across the board, her mind entirely in the zone. The 30 minutes elapsed. The moderator was about to announce the end of the round when Maya stepped back, her final mark made. She had not only solved the problem, she had presented her solution in a way that was both fundamentally correct and utterly beautiful. The audience remained silent for a long moment, staring at the elegant solution on the board. Then a single person began to clap. Then another. And then the entire auditorium erupted in a standing ovation. The judges conferred for a moment, then the moderator stepped forward, a wide, proud smile on his face. Miss Jones has not only solved the problem, but she has done so with a new, fundamentally elegant proof. She is the sole winner of the Northwood Mathematics Invitational. Maya stood on the stage, the applause washing over her. She looked out at the sea of faces, her professors, her friends, and the rest of the faculty and students, and saw something she had never seen before. Not pity, not curiosity, but pure, unadulterated respect. The cleaner from the night shift had just become Northwood's sole and strongest candidate, and she had proved it to everyone. The gold medal from the Northwood Invitational was a beautiful, heavy disc that Maya kept in a small velvet pouch. It wasn't a symbol of a dream fulfilled, but a promise of a new, greater one. The victory had changed her standing on campus, but more importantly, it had changed her own sense of self. The lingering specter of imposter syndrome had finally been vanquished. She no longer felt like a temporary fixture in this world, she felt like a resident. But her triumph came with a new kind of pressure, a new set of expectations. She wasn't just Maya now, She was Northwood's sole and strongest candidate, and her next step was to represent her school at the Intercollegiate Mathematics Olympiad. The preparation for the Olympiad was an entirely different beast from the in-house competition. It was a rigorous 6-week boot camp designed by her 3 mentors to be more challenging than any class she had ever taken. Their sessions were held in the same lecture hall where she had been discovered, a full-circle narrative that was not lost on her. Dr. Finch worked with her on the history of mathematics, presenting her with centuries-old problems that had stumped the greatest minds and teaching her the elegant, classical approaches to their solutions. Dr. Reed presented her with problems that required her to think outside the box, to find unconventional solutions by using principles from entirely different fields. Dr. Chin focused on speed and endurance, presenting her with a barrage of high-level problems under timed conditions, pushing her to think not just deeply but quickly and accurately. There were moments when she felt like she was drowning. The problems were on a different plane of difficulty, designed to test the limits of human intellect. There was one particularly brutal problem on elliptic curves that she struggled with for 3 days, the frustration mounting with every failed attempt. She was in the library, her head in her hands, when Dr. Chin sat down beside her, a gentle hand on her shoulder. "The greatest mathematicians are not the ones who never get stuck, Maya," he said, his voice soft. "They are the ones who get stuck and then keep going. You can't let the problem defeat you. You have to defeat the problem." His words reframed her mindset. The frustration melted away, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. She approached the problem again, not with a sense of dread, but with a quiet determination. She saw a new way, an elegant simplification that had eluded her, and she solved it in less than an hour. The feeling of victory was sweeter than ever. She learned that the struggle was as important as the solution, that a mind grows not in moments of triumph but in moments of quiet, relentless struggle. When the day of the Olympiad arrived, she was a coiled spring of readiness. The competition was held at a historic convention center, a grand, intimidating space with soaring ceilings and a hush that spoke of intellectual solemnity. The air was thick with tension, a mix of nervous energy and fierce, unspoken rivalry. She saw the other contestants, the best and brightest from universities across the nation. They carried the weight of their own institutions, their faces a mix of confidence and intense focus. She felt a familiar pull to withdraw, to become invisible, but she pushed it back. She was no longer just Maya. She was Northwood. The competition was a 2-day event, a marathon of mental endurance. The problems were a blend of pure and applied mathematics, a mix of logic, topology, and number theory. They were brutal, designed not to find an answer but to test the very limits of a contestant's ability. She worked in a silent, focused bubble, her mind a tireless engine, her hand flying across the paper. She didn't think about the other competitors or the judges watching her. She only thought about the problems, their elegant structure, their hidden beauty, and the satisfaction of finding the one true solution. After the second day, she felt mentally exhausted, but a quiet certainty settled in her heart. She had done her best. She had pushed herself to the limit, and she had a feeling she had not only solved all the problems but had done so in her own unique way, with her own elegant proofs. The award ceremony was held that evening in a grand ballroom. The room was packed with contestants, their families, and their professors. Dr. Finch, Dr. Reed, and Dr. Chin sat with her at a table in the back, their faces a mixture of pride and nail-biting anxiety. The bronze medalists were announced first, their names a roll call of some of the most prestigious universities in the country. Maya clapped politely, her heart pounding in her chest. Then came the silver medalists. The names were called, and a few of her friends from the competition went up to the stage. She was happy for them, but a part of her felt a pang of disappointment. She had felt so confident, had worked so hard. Had she come this far only to fall short at the final hurdle? She glanced at Dr. Finch, whose face was unreadable. Then the announcer's voice came over the speaker, and the room fell silent. And now, for the winner of the gold medal, the sole perfect score, and the youngest winner in the history of the Olympiad, from Northwood University, Maya Jones. The sound of her name was a physical jolt. She stood up, her legs feeling unsteady. Her professors erupted in a triumphant cheer, their faces alight with an uncontainable joy. She walked to the stage, the applause a wave of sound that carried her forward. She accepted the gold medal, the cool metal feeling impossibly heavy in her hand. The lights of the cameras flashed, and she stood there, a solitary figure on the stage, the embodiment of a dream come true. She looked out at the sea of faces, and her eyes found her mentors at their table. Their faces were a reflection of her own journey, Dr. Finch's kind eyes now brimming with tears, Dr. Reed's formidable demeanor broken by a rare, wide smile, and Dr. Chin, who simply shook his head and clapped with an infectious, unbridled joy. She saw her friends, her small support system, cheering wildly. She had done it. She had won her first gold medal. She had proven herself not just to them but to the world. And in that moment, the former cleaner knew she had found not just a new profession, but her true place in the world. The applause in the ballroom at the Intercollegiate Mathematics Olympiad was a sound Maya would never forget. It was not a polite ripple but a thunderous, joyous roar. She stood on the stage, the gold medal heavy and cool against her palm, and felt a quiet, profound sense of peace. The struggle, the countless hours of self-study, the nights spent cleaning and dreaming, it all culminated in this moment. But this was not an ending, it was a beginning. The aftermath of her victory was a whirlwind. Her story, a real-life tale of a cleaning lady turned mathematical prodigy, went viral. News reporters clamored for interviews. She was a guest on morning shows, and articles about her appeared in major publications. She handled the attention with the same quiet grace she had shown on the stage, always deflecting the praise back to her mentors and the university that had taken a chance on her. The university, once a place that had felt so distant, was now her biggest champion. Dr. Vance, the dean of admissions who had initially been skeptical, personally wrote her a letter of congratulations, calling her the greatest discovery in the history of Northwood University. Her professors were beside themselves with pride. Dr. Finch, his eyes still shining with emotion, simply said, "We knew. We always knew." Dr. Reed, her formidable exterior softened, told her, "You are a testament to the fact that brilliance can be found anywhere. We just have to be willing to look." And Dr. Chin, ever the energetic optimist, would often pull her aside, a wide grin on his face to say, "The world is your oyster, Maya. What do you want to do now?" She didn't have to think about it for long. The gold medal opened doors she had only dreamed of. Job offers from prestigious tech companies and research fellowships from top-tier universities across the globe began to pour in. They offered her life-changing salaries and opportunities that would have once seemed like science fiction. But every time she considered an offer, a different thought would pull her back. The quiet halls of Northwood, the kind faces of her mentors, the chalkboard where her new life had begun. She knew what she wanted. She wanted to pay it forward. She decided to stay. She spent the next few years at Northwood, excelling in her master's and then her PhD programs. She delved deeper into her passion, exploring the elegant intersections of topology and data science. Her doctoral thesis, which proposed a new framework for analyzing complex data sets, was hailed as a breakthrough in the field. She graduated at the top of her class, a valedictorian not just of her department, but of a new era for the university. Her journey had not just been about her own success, it had also been about her family. With the financial support from the university and her own academic success, she was able to lift Malik out of debt and provide him with the security she had once struggled to find. Her parents, who had always worried about her, were now filled with a quiet pride that she saw every time they spoke on the phone. She had not only transformed her own life but had changed the trajectory of her entire family. A decade after she had first walked through the halls with her cleaning cart, Maya stood in front of a new group of students. The room was not the small lecture hall, but a larger, more impressive one, filled with graduate students from all over the world. She was now Dr. Jones, a tenured professor at Northwood University. She had turned down countless offers to be here, and she wouldn't have it any other way. Her office was a few doors down from Dr. Finch's, who was now a professor emeritus, but still came to campus for tea and conversation. Dr. Reed and Dr. Chen were now her colleagues, her friends, her equals. The three of them had established a new program at the university dedicated to finding and nurturing non-traditional students. The late bloomers, the self-taught geniuses, the ones who didn't fit the mold. It was her way of building a ladder for those who, like her, had been forced to climb from the bottom. One afternoon, as she was lecturing on the beauty of abstract algebra, she noticed a young man standing in the doorway. He was wearing a familiar blue uniform and he was holding a cleaning cart. He was watching her, his eyes wide with a look she knew all too well, a mix of curiosity and a deep, unspoken hunger. She smiled to herself and continued her lecture, but she gave the young man a small, knowing nod. She knew his story because it had once been hers. She knew his potential because she had been given the chance to prove her own. Her story was no longer just about herself. It was about a legacy. It was a testament to the fact that a single moment, a single opportunity, can change the entire equation of a life. And her work now was to ensure that she was not the last. The girl who had once struggled to solve the problems of her own life was now helping others solve the problems of the universe. Dear viewer, if you've watched up to this point, thank you for your support. I have a small request. If you enjoy my stories, you can subscribe to the channel, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts about the stories in the comments. Enjoy watching. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video.